So good evening, everybody. Welcome to this webinar series by IITACB. So the attainment of first criticality by the prototype fast breeder reactor at Kalpakam on April 6, 2026 is indeed a watershed moment for India's energy sovereignty. So this achievement serves as a vital link to harnessing India's vast domestic thorium reserves, transforming a vision first sketched by Dr. Homi J. Bhabha into a tangible reality for national energy independence. With the nuclear energy mission targeting 100 gigawatts by 2047, this historic step at Kalpakam provides the momentum needed to reach net zero and fuel a developed India with clean, reliable, and indigenous power. To shed more light on this achievement, we have with us today Dr. Arun Kumar Nayak, a distinguished mechanical engineer and a nuclear scientist whose career spans over 35 years of pioneering work in advanced nuclear reactor design, safety, and energy policy. He is going to present to us the challenges and opportunity towards our journey of 100 gigawatt by 2047. To moderate this session, we have with us today Dr. Vandana Nanal, Senior Professor and Chair of the Department of Nuclear and Atomic Physics at TIFR Mumbai and a Joint Chair of the BARC TIFR Electron LINAC facility. Over to you, Dr. Nayak.
Very good evening. And there is a national mandate that we need to have 100 gigawatts nuclear power. And the very objective is to accomplish it by the year 2047, when India will be just 100 years old. So 100 gigawatt when India reaches 100 years old. And the basic objective is to transform India from the current developing status to a developed status, that is Viksit Bharat. So what I say, the 100 gigawatt nuclear power is the gateway to Viksit Bharat. At the same time, the country has a lot of commitments because historically we have been burning a lot of fossil fuels. Today, more than 90% of the fuel consumption, right from the kitchen to the transport sector, to the industry sector, almost more than 90% we consume fossil fuels. That's basically the carbon-based fuels, and that's the root cause for the global warming. And we are all committed to safeguard the Mother Earth against a climatic disaster. So there are two challenges. One challenge is we have to transform India to a developed status in the next 20-25 years. And that's why nuclear power becomes imminent, considering both the climatic condition as well as more and more power requirement to transform it. So let's first understand what is the meaning of Viksit Bharat. Viksit Bharat is something which is directly correlated with our income. And today our per capita income is just above 2,500 US dollar per person per year. And the World Bank says if India has to be called as Viksit Bharat, a developed India, it has to climb at least 8 times. Roughly our per capita income should be exactly 21,664 US dollar per person per year. And today our economy is just above 4 trillion. And that's what if we multiply by 8 times, so it comes to 32 US dollar, trillion dollar, or the government says we have to climb to $35 trillion economy. That's why we say by 2047 will be developed India. And to accomplish such a huge economic growth in the next 25 years, and the growth rate has to be very high. The economic growth rate is 7.6% per year continuously. And the Reserve Bank says if we consider the inflation, it will be more than 10.6%. And so GDP growth rate has to be balanced by a proportionate energy growth rate. Otherwise, this is not going to happen. So historically, what you see, the leftmost one, which I'm showing here, the GDP growth rate versus the energy. You see both go hand in hand. On the right side graph, what I have done, as a mathematician, I have done it. The left x-axis is basically the GDP in trillion, and the y-axis is the primary energy consumption in terawatt hour per year, or you can say billion units per year. And today we are roughly $4 trillion US 4 trillion US dollar, and we consume just above 10,000 billion units. Please remember that we consume just above 10,000 billion units. And look at China having almost the same population, and their GDP is close to $18 trillion, and they consume roughly 40,000 billion units. So GDP is four times more, and energy consumption is 4,000 more. So to climb to 35 trillion US dollar, which is even twice of what China's GDP is, so there is a big debate that how much energy India will require to support such a huge economic growth. So there was a lot of debates at Niti Aayog, and more or less, considering various factors, which I don't have time to discuss here, it is now agreed that India must produce at least 30,000 billion units of energy to support a $35 trillion economy. So today we consume roughly 10,000 billion units, and we must grow at another 20,000 billion units plus to reach a 30,000 billion units energy consumption. That is what is required to support a $35 trillion economy. And if you look at historically, no energy consumption has gone without the CO2 emissions, and that is how, historically, if you look at the GDP growth rate, has also caused a proportionate CO2 emissions. It is globally, because globally also today, most of the countries consume even more than 70, 80, 90% of their energy budget from fossil fuels. So this is very critical. They globally we produce something like 60 billion tons of CO2 per year. It's globally, I'm just saying. And the bottommost table is very critical. Suppose we have to limit the Earth's temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, then the CO2 budget which Mother Earth can have is hardly 400 to 500 billion tons of CO2. So 60 billion tons of CO2 we emit per year, assuming no further rise in CO2 emission. If I divide by 60, it is hardly 8 to 10 years left. And it's well known by end of this decade, the 1.5 degrees Celsius is likely to cross. And for the 2 degrees Celsius limit, the Mother Earth can maximum accommodate 1150 to 1350 billion tons of CO2. And if I divide that by 60, it is hardly 20 years. So 2025 plus 20 is 2047. So 2047 is a very critical year for India. We dream to be a developed India with $35 trillion economy. We that to support that will be requiring roughly 30,000 billion tons of energy, and 2047, unless we break the CO2 emission, 2 degrees Celsius is going to cross. So this is the story from the left. Look at the right one. Right top table, what it shows that to produce 1 unit of electricity, how much which country is emitting? The United States emit almost half kg of CO2 to produce 1 unit of electricity. China, roughly 700 grams, UK, 350 grams, France, 90 grams, and India, one of the highest, is 815 grams of CO2. France, it is 90 grams because 60-80% of the electricity in France comes from nuclear. And the IEA says that if you want to limit those CO2 emissions, then no, I'll say that the energy setup which you choose should emit more than 11 grams of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity. This number is very critical, that what is the energy device we have to choose so that they don't emit more than 11 grams of CO2 per 1 unit of electricity. And the bottommost one shows that no energy setup except nuclear and wind can really support to the energy requirement of the globe. if we want to limit it to degrees Celsius limit, because all our other setups, whether it's hydro, solar, geo, everything, the amount of CO2 emitted per 1 unit of electricity is much, much higher than 11 grams of CO2. This is where is the requirement why government is stressing so much that we have to go for nuclear. There is another story that why renewables we cannot push. Renewables is what nature is given, it cannot be created. Looking at the geology of India, which is one of the highest, most population dense country in the world, the land available for renewable is very small. And the Ministry of New and Renewable Energy Sources, MNRE, even Niti Aayog, their estimate is that the maximum amount of renewable potential for India is hardly 4,000 billion units, which is very, very small, even hardly 40% of today's total energy consumption. And there are, of course, debates nationally, internationally, that as we are proceeding, we can have more and more energy efficient devices, smart grids can play, better energy storages can happen. All these things may take 4,000 to 8,000 billion units. Even today, we consume 10,000 billion units, that will give a deficit of 2,000 billion units. Now, suppose we have to think of our energy requirement for a 35 trillion economy, which I said 30,000 billion units required. The deficit is very large, of the order of more than 20,000 billion units. And if I talk about the nuclear power program, and which is having very high capacity factor, it requires roughly 2,500 gigawatt. Please remember, if India has to accomplish a 35 trillion economy with clean energy sources, that too with the full potential of renewables, it will require no less than 2,500 gigawatt nuclear. So what is 100 gigawatt? 100 gigawatt, I say, is a good starter. It's a very beautiful starter before the main course is served. It's a gateway to enter into a large scale nuclear power program. And there is a very big thing which is happening also in India. The coal plants, which are the drivers for electricity production today, are retiring too fast. And by 2047, assuming government doesn't create another coal plant in place of coal, roughly 200 gigawatt electricity coal plant will be off the grid. So this is something we have to understand. And it is not new. You look at states like Maharashtra, West Bengal, Jharkhand, Gujarat, many states, many coal plants have started retiring. More than 20 gigawatt electricity from the coal is off the grid today. And if you look at what is the size of these coal plants, which are today producing power or giving us electricity, most of them are below 300 megawatt size. Let's understand this number. Most of the coal plants which are operating today are below 300 megawatt. Only very recently, large size coal plants of new designs like supercritical one have come. Otherwise, large numbers are really very small size. What is the American strategy today doing? America has now surveyed their coal sites, more than 400 coal sites they have surveyed, and what they found that they could be the home to roughly 200 gigawatt nuclear, which has to be repurposed. And repurpose has a lot of benefit. One thing, by retiring them and reusing the infrastructure which is available there, could repower, and that could save $275 million per gigawatt. This is something we all have to understand. At the same time, what the American study shows that apart from the IAS study, there is a good amount of employment generation for each megawatt power we produce. 2.8 times more employment is created from nuclear as compared to that what was there in coal. Apart from this, let's understand what we think of a developed India. Today, look at the captive power plants which today provide the energy to steel industry, cement industry, chemical industry, metallurgical industry, mineral industry, textile industry, mining industry. In the last 8 years, the amount of power consumed in them has gone from 40 gigawatt to 80 gigawatt. And for a developed India or Biksit Bharat, the estimate is that the amount of power consumption only in the captive sector could climb to as high as 400 to 500 gigawatt. And today, they all are powered mostly by coal and diesel. Let's understand that if we remove coal and diesel, only for the captive power sector, we need 400 to 500 gigawatt nuclear. Look at transport sector. This is something I speak in every forum. Look at America and India. In America, more than 90% people go by flight. In India, 90% people are waiting to catch a flight. And same thing also owning with regard to four-wheelers. So the amount of energy consumption required in transport sector could rise significantly as we move to the path of a developed India. And in my estimate, if a modest climb in the transport sector energy from 3 to 5 times would require energy system of that of India today, only in the transport sector. And today, the transport sector is mostly run by gasoline. And if one to remove gasoline or gas, what is that going to take in its place? Is either renewables or nuclear or combination of both. This is what we have to keep in mind. The other bigger sector in transport is the shipping industry, the cargo ships. Roughly 7,500 cargo ships India is today putting on the sea, and they're all driven by diesel. The Minister of Shipping wants at least 5,000 of them to be decarboned as soon as possible and decarboned by small and micro nuclear reactors. The AI and data, which is India wants to climb very fast to be a world leader, especially in AI. AI means is power guggler. And by in just a few years from now, India would be requiring several gigawatt of nuclear power, which has to be very dedicated exclusively for AI and data. This we have to also keep in mind. This is something we all have to worry. 1951, our population was 361 million, and today we are close to 1,500 million, and by mid of the century will be 1,700 million. So the population is climbing almost 5 times from independence till to mid of this century. But rain god doesn't increase the amount of water proportionately. So the per capita water availability has shrunk exponential down. The UN says India will be water starved very soon, and that's what the requirement of clean drinking water to 1.7 billion population has to be ensured, and that will require a lot of energy, massive energy coming from nuclear. So nuclear power, where are we? As we all know, in India today, hardly 25 nuclear reactors in operation, and they produce hardly 8.8 gigawatt. We are talking about 100 gigawatt by mid of the century, and developed India 2,500 gigawatt. So 8.8 gigawatt produce hardly 57 billion units of energy in an energy basket of 10,000 billion units. This is what we all have to keep in mind. So the future goal is very hard and very tough, very challenging, and we all have to tighten the belt, even for 100 gigawatt nuclear power capacity by mid of this century. So what I say, this is a brave and a welcome step in the history of India. And this is a brave step by government that it has given a big mandate to all of us that we have to climb at least by 12 times from the present power production. And once that is climbed, lot of technologies will be observed and that will accelerate to the amount of nuclear power which we are talking about, several hundreds of gigawatt as we move forward. What are the broader issues for nuclear? Why it has not been able to climb? The most important is the cost. What is the capital cost? The levelized cost of electricity. Today it is totally government control. Even though the Santi bill gives the edge for the private to operate, to come, build, own, and operate, the biggest fear amongst the private is the capex or the electricity cost. And the public is equally concerned about the accidents, Chernobyl, Fukushima, radiation leak, cancer. So this is something when we are pushing nuclear, the public mind is still not ready. There is not enough education with them. The third bigger issue is the fuel supply security. And today we are also importing quite a good amount of uranium from abroad. So the private is totally worried, who is going to give me the nuclear fuel? Am I ensured? And we have a lot of thorium, and when the thorium is really going to come? Management of nuclear waste, as we all know, each gram of irradiated uranium has to be stored for several hundred years till the decay till the radiation issues are resolved. So the question is, who is going to store so much waste and what is the policy and so on. So the big debate in the mind of the public is, should we go, should we not go, and if we go, how to accomplish. This is broadly the issues, not only in the mind of the utilities, but in the public, in the mind of the economics, also the nuclear financing companies. Let's look at the technology issues or options for the private industry. Domestically, we have two technologies available. One is historically the PHWRs is the workhorse for India. India has mastered this technology to 500 and 700 megawatt PHWR. 220 and 700 megawatt PHWRs are operational, lot of experience, supply chain well established, fuel design, fabrication well known, AERB licensing established, safety, it is a generation 3 plus design, especially 700 megawatt reactor. So safety well known, proven, and historically don't have any accident until now. So these are the trademarks for Indian PSW program, so which can be offered to the private utilities. And recently, India made history by making the criticality of 500 megawatt PFBR is a historic step, and of course, it may take some time to gain the operational experience of the fast reactor. And this is complete indigenous. And once it is operational, the bigger issue of the waste, the spent fuel, that is going to be resolved, especially because those fuel can be the spent fuel. We can reprocess, take the plutonium and use in the PFBR. Technology options for the private then. Domestically, they can talk about the 220 megawatt PHWR, which is a modified version of the Bharat small reactor, which is a modified version of the 220 megawatt classical Indian PHWR. The 700 megawatt PHWR already operational. So these two are under the IS safeguard, so they can be easily offered. Advantage for the private is the 100% domestic supply chain exists. The capex is known. The fuel fabrication is known. Everything is known for the PSWR. PFBR or in future, the commercial fast reactors, the Department of Atomic Energy has to work out how this technology can be offered to a private because of the use of the plutonium in this fuel. And Also, these are the breeder reactors. So this is something we all have to think of, whether first reactors can be at all given to the private. If yes, when and how. Imported light water reactors, definitely, apart from the Russian one, the VVR 1000, now it is VVR 1200, the private has the choice. They can negotiate with Russian, with the American or the French or even the Korean ones, looking at the techno-commercial viability, the supply chain aspects. These reactors can also be obtained by the private utilities. Advantage for that for them will be the assurance of the fuel supply by these vendors. But there are certain constraints or fears in the minds of the private operators, especially none of the private operators, including the PSU and TPC, they don't have any experience in nuclear reactor design, project, construction, licensing, operation, maintenance, anything, they don't have the experience. So entering into the nuclear sector, they require, which is highly technology, I'll say that they require definitely hand-holding because of the high technology involved. Question is, who is going to do them the hand-holding and to what extent, whether NPCL will give, how much they will give, or who is going to help them and to what. This is a big question. Foreign suppliers may give end-to-end delivery like a turnkey project, but the cost is going to be very high, whether the private is ready. Nuclear financing, many venture capitals today ready to invest, but they don't have any experience, especially when to invest, how much to invest, when they will get the return. These are the, I will say that, unknown factors in the market. Levelized cost of electricity, not well known to the private, because until now, the back end of the fuel cycle is never considered in the LCOE. Domestic technologies, PHWRs, even though it is offered to the private, their concern is the fuel supply assurance. Who will supply the nuclear critical equipments like pressure tubes, calendar tubes, fuel bundle? These are even the other equipment they can get from the Indian market. These are the critical items. Something has to be assured to them. Who will supply the heavy water? And who will do the online health monitoring of the pressure tube? This is something critical for PHWRs. Periodic replacement of pressure tubes every 10, 15 years. Who is going to do that and who is taking the responsibility? The list can go on. So implementation of 100 gigawatt, that's why in my opinion, would should require some dedicated setup or a special purpose vehicle, especially to arrange and guide the new entrants in the nuclear sector, especially helping them with the right technology, helping them how to put in nuclear reactor, the siting, the fuel supply, the heavy water supply, critical nuclear equipment supply, localization, supply chain, nuclear financing, DA licensing, ARV authorization, international partnership, human resources development, training, radioactive waste management, small modular reactor technology innovations, deployment, investment, collaboration, implementations for nuclear security and safeguards. This is something we need to have a setup in the government to help the private or NTPC to accelerate the nuclear power. Yes, we should make a break and let's have some question answer, then we move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. That was a wonderful building up of the program. You very nicely laid out the requirement for the nuclear energy. I mean, the basically the requirement for the clean energy and keeping up with the CO2 emission cap. And as you pointed out, that there are safety issues, but I think that we'll come back to at the end of the lecture after second half. before, I mean, as people are typing in the question, I just want to quickly take a minute to say something about nuclear fission. This whole nuclear energy actually started with the discovery of fission, as people know. And I think the one major point is that in chemical reactions, you only get energies of the scale of electron volt, whereas the nucleus gives mega electron volt. And I just will tell a small story here. Otto Hahn and Lisa Meitner, who discovered the fission, together, and it was actually a long journey to find the answer to the question. But when they were finally found it towards the end of 38, Lisa Meitner was already out of Germany, and some of you may know this story, but it's really a wonderful story of a scientific endeavor, so that's why I want to repeat it. So she was out on a walk in the Christmas break with her nephew, who was a physicist. She had received this letter from Otto Hahn saying that what he has discovered as a product in neutron on uranium was definitely barium and not radium. And during this snow walk, the idea, just while she was pondering over this letter, she just sat on a tree trunk, and the idea came to her that a neutron in the uranium is giving enough energy that uranium breaks into two nearly equal parts. And what is even more amazing is she worked out the energy released to be 200 MeV, which is fairly accurate, as we know what is coming in. Yeah. So it's really amazing, the insight of her, which is coming. So we have a question which says, why is it that we do not have the expertise to design, build, and manage nuclear reactors? We have been investing as a country in the atomic energy for several decades. So why we don't have the expertise? Maybe you're going to come to this later part of your talk, and in that case, we can take it later.
Yeah, but I can answer a little bit.
Sure. Go ahead.
Historically, though, until now, till the Shanti Bill came, the Atomic Energy Act only limits Department of Atomic Energy to do nuclear. So that's why organizations like BRC, IGCAR, or NPCL, they are the entities who are legally allowed to design the nuclear reactor. And that's how the PSW programs historically has started. And I'm not going to say the whole story how PSW program started in India till it was completely indigenized. And the same story happened with the fast reactor program. But it is a slow story, definitely. All of a sudden, there was a big pressure. So we didn't have other technologies. For example, the big light water reactors or the SMRs, which we are talking about, we don't have those technologies. That's why we are talking about the foreign technologies, also apart from what we have indigenous. Not that we don't have any reactors, we have the reactors. Yes.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
So here the story begins. But what is the limitation of current nuclear technologies? It's very crucial for Indian geography. There are a lot of technologies around the globe, including the Indians' classical PSWRs, but there are certain constraints. One is the biggest constraint. If you look at the right side, we are today close to 1.5 billion population, and our population density is the largest in the world. It is a small geography and a huge population sitting on the land. So getting a greenfield site to build a nuclear power plant becomes more and more difficult. So this is something we all have to understand. A classical nuclear reactor would require 1 kilometer of exclusion zone where public is not allowed to live. 16 kilometers of emergency planning zone. In case of there is some radiation emergency, these people have to be evacuated. And 30 kilometers of radiation surveillance zone. So getting so much, I would say greenfield sites to build so many nuclear power plants is a major concern question for India. Other issue is, suppose we are talking about 1,000 megawatt reactor, the project cost is very high. For example, with a modest 25 crore per megawatt, a 2 units will cost 50,000 crore. Let me tell you, most of the very big private industries, they say we don't have such big pockets. putting 50,000 crore to build 2 nuclear reactors. This is one of the things we all have to understand. So large investment because the size of the reactor is very large, and there is a lot of delay in construction, primarily because these are not modular. There are delays in supply chain. Some component come today, some component doesn't come. So the construction delays are part of the game. And that causes almost 30 to 40% as interest during construction. Safety, I said, excellent, but then low probable core melt accident may occur. And that's why most of the modern plants, they require core catchers, hydrogen mitigation devices, containment technique, and these numbers keep on increasing, and they all are complexity cost. The moment you say a core melt, there is a public fear in mind. That is why these reactors, they cannot satisfy the word which says, say, no emergency planning. We need to have always emergency planning in the public domain. Another very important factor which we all have to understand, especially after the recent war, the safety and security, two very important aspects. Security means any external attack or internal malevolent act. A terrorist may enter into the control room, try to jeopardize something, or there is an external drone attack, missile attack, rocket attack. We all have to be sure that the reactor containment is safe enough to safeguard the safety of the plant. And that also, whether the instrumentation control system works, doesn't work, the cooling system available, not available, the safety has to be assured. This is something the new nuclear reactors have to implement. Third thing is nuclear energy, what I described is just not for electricity production. Most of the industries today require heat or temperature, and they don't really require electricity because if you give them electricity, they have to again convert to heat. And towards that, the new generation technologies like high temperature reactors, gas cooled reactors, the fast reactors, their temperatures are much, much higher than the classical PHWRs or the light water reactors. This is where the small modular reactors take a new game changer. Small modular reactors, size is small, power is below 300 megawatt. Modular because it is a factory assembled reactor, plug and play type. And reactor, I think Bandana already explained what is fission. So fission energy is going to be transported here, but this technology is definitely different from the classical technologies which I described. Small is not new. In fact, the nuclear industry started only with the small reactors. These are called the generation 1 and 2 reactors. Then there was thinking that we have to go for economic of scales. That's why the large reactors came. Otherwise, the industry is having several years of experience on designing, fabricating, operating small nuclear reactors. What these SMR technologies today people are talking about? Apart from the classical water-cooled land-based reactors, which include the heavy water reactors, BWRs and PWRs, and also for the marine applications, which I just spoke about, 5,000 ships waiting for decarbon. Similarly, the advanced technologies like molten salt reactors, liquid metal cooled reactors, or high temperature reactors, including micro reactors size less than 10 megawatt. These are something which are in design stage or some are in advanced stage for deployment. Just comparing a classical big reactor called a PR 1400 megawatt, I would say the Korean reactor, and then they started to reduce the size to something like a 300 megawatt called the Bandi reactor. You can see how the size is reduced. And the smart, which is a basically SMR is 100 megawatt, In the three, you can see in the SMR, all the equipments are inside the vessel. That's why it's called the integral reactor. There is no pipes in this. As a result of which there is nothing called a break or a loss of coolant accident, which can cause accidents like what we saw in, for example, MI or we saw in Fukushima. And what are the timelines for deployment of these SMRs? Some are already in the, I'll say, the advanced stage of deployment. Some are in operation. For example, the KLT-40 in Russia is already in the sea, operational. Japan high temperature reactor is 30 megawatt size, operational. Chinese HTRPM, which is small size reactor, is already operational. Many are under construction, and some are, I would say, that going to be constructed in future. How the SMRs address the issues which I spoke about, especially look at no emergency planning requirement. One very important factor we all have to understand, these SMRs, one thing that the size of the reactor is small. So radioactivity inventory is small. Plus, because everything is packed inside the vessel, there is no question of accidents like a classical PWR or PSWRs they experience. As a result of which, there is no question of any radioactivity leak of magnitude which can cause an offside emergency. So that is why these are tagged as walk away safe reactor. In the sense any accident occurs, the operator can go home and take care of his family rather than taking care of his reactor. It will be come to safe condition on its own. One of the things where myself had designed a 100 megawatt classical SMR, and if you see that in all safety systems, even though here it fell, the maximum temperature which the fuel sees is hardly 750 degrees Celsius, which is well below the melting point temperature of the uranium fuel. So this is where the SMRs safety come into picture. And because these are integral reactors, so this can be factory assembled as a single product, not like a conventional reactor. So many can be built in factory and come for direct employment. So this can have a rapid multiplication factor. Economic competitiveness comes from two aspects. One is the economy of numbers rather than size, and factory fabrication modularization, as a result of which there are a lot of advantages, especially to the new entrants. One is, suppose you talk about 100 megawatt or 300 megawatt reactor, the amount of money which they're investing is much smaller than a 30,000 crore, which I said. So the pocket of these new entrants is sufficient enough to invest in these reactors. Because these are factory assembled reactor, the interest during construction doesn't happen. As a result of which, this has economic merit. And a lot of calculation worldwide has happened on this. I'll say that the OECD calculation shows that even for a fast unit, in Indian terms, the electricity cost could be 5 rupee 30 paisa per unit. And if you go for large number, it can be well below 5 rupees per unit. For India, next two slides are very critical. Whether we import these reactors from abroad or domestically design manufacture, few things we have to keep in mind. 100% localization we have to keep in mind. That means all equipment component we should be able to manufacture in India. That only can bring down the cost. And these SMRs are not the candidates for the greenfield sites. Let's keep in mind, greenfield sites will keep only for the large conventional reactors. These SMRs will target exclusively for repurposing the coal plant. So coal plant are in interior India, so they have to be transported by rail or road. That's why the size has to be smaller. Third thing is we have to ensure by design that under no conditions the core heat up is possible. And that is why There is no requirement of any exclusion zone or emergency planning zone. The plant boundary becomes the boundary of the reactor. And there are a few things also we have to keep in mind. The design should be so good that it should be sited anywhere. And one of the important parameters for that is the seismic design basis. The classical large reactors cannot be put in a high seismic region. And if you look at a coal plant, either it is sitting on a high seismic region or it is sitting nearby a fault. So the design basis for seismic condition for these SMRs have to be much higher. And as you go interior India, getting river water or lake water is not possible because no state government will allow to touch their water body for nuclear purpose. So dry cooling is a must. And as I have been saying, thorium has to be the flexible enough to use, and that's the most important is complying to India's closed fuel cycle. What is that US NRC has done? This is something I want to sensitize to all the listeners, especially for SMRs, so that they don't require any emergency planning zone. A dose-based criteria they have put that under no condition, if the SMRs can prove that maximum total dose below 10 millisievert, a public can experience outside the plant boundary, then it really doesn't require any emergency planning zone. This is where I am saying the SMR's design have to be completely different from a classical large reactor design. Because it is so safe, as I said, even the OECD countries now planning to keep the SMRs away from liability. The third party liability may be excluded for SMRs and microreactors. What I did a few years back, I tried to map the SMRs, especially in coal plants of India, repurposing. Some I'm going to show here. Talcher Thermal Power Station, it produced 460 megawatt. It has retired. In the same site, if SMRs can be put, it produced 600 megawatt. Guru Gobind Ropar Thermal Power Station, it produces 1260 megawatt. In the same site, I found a SMR park can be built of 14,800 megawatt. Nalco, it today consumes almost 1200 megawatt coal to support its aluminum production. In the same site, I myself mapped and I found that 1200 megawatt coal can be repurposed with SMRs. South of India, there is a place called Uppur, which is in Tamil Nadu. Once upon a time, this site was given to NTPC to produce coal because of some reason this site could not be utilized. And I mapped it and found that 12,800 megawatt SMRs can be produced, can be built here. And there are many such stories. I don't want to go into detail. What I want to say that SMRs can repurpose most of the retiring coal plants because there are several advantages. One is the land acquisition. We don't have to do that. Land is available. Water body is available. Site survey is completed. Transport facility available. Trained manpower is available. Township is available. And all these things will yield not only to faster deployment, repurposing coal to nuclear, but also produce much more power than what coal was giving. Apart from the classical SMRs which I have spoke about, there is a time to look into more into small size micro reactors of the order of 10, 20 megawatt. What America is doing? America is targeting exclusively for data centers, maritime industries, malls, hospitals, airports, across the national highway corridors for hydrogen production. This is something we have to think differently. Several thousand cargo ships need small size power, 10 to 50 megawatt size. We have to look into that. Data centers will require uninterrupted power supply from microreactors. Hydrogen production and so on. This is something, a big industry can happen exclusively from microreactor. Most important, look at our northeast region, which is sitting on a Himalaya region. The classical large reactors cannot be put there. Even SMRs are difficult. I believe that region can be repurposed exclusively for microreactors. And going to 2500 gigawatt as we move forward, it itself causes investment of $6 to $7 trillion economy, 1.5 times today's total India's GDP. And that will create millions of direct employment, indirect employment, apart from a lot of CSR activities. I believe a big transformation for Indian industry and Indian society is on the horizon. Look at, there is a big concern. What is the fuel? This is where Bhabha started the three-stage program. He understood we have very limited uranium, hardly 30 to 40,000 tons, which can support hardly 10 gigawatt nuclear electricity from PHWRs. And the first step has matured. That's why he went to the second stage, that is basically reprocessing of the spent fuel, taking out the plutonium. And look at the second stage alone can give us 400 to 500 gigawatt nuclear, a huge amount of power is envisaged from the second stage. And if you go to the third stage, where we burn thorium and uranium 233, that alone gives more than 1600 gigawatt. So together, my estimate is shows that almost 1800 gigawatt nuclear or much more than can happen only from our indigenous fuel without looking for fuel outside. Today we are importing fuel. The numbers can definitely go up provided the technologies are available to us. Why PHWRs are relevant today? I think we are just talking about. PHWRs have a very beautiful characteristics. Most important is safety. Is a reactor, natural uranium is the fuel. There is no, added reactivity in that. So inherently the fuel is safe. And most important, the fuel is sitting on a huge amount of water, moderator, as well as the calendar of hot water. It takes several hours, several days for this water to be lost. And that is where the safety scores. Today, if you say in the world, which is the safest reactor operational, the score comes for PSWR. And that is how the wisdom of Bhava came. Bhava and Lewis, most of you probably know, W.B. Lewis is called the father of Kandu technology, the PSWR technology. Bhava and Lewis, they were good friends. And since the days they were doing PhD, they had shared many things. The importance of neutron economy, natural uranium, Bhava knew how important natural uranium and also the heavy water reactor technology. And both of them, shared a lot of opinions about thorium in the long run and also developed a sustainable nuclear energy future. Let me cite a few things. That is Wilfred Lewis, who is called the father of Kandu. He has written books and books, especially on thorium use. And a very beautiful thing I'm just citing here, in a Kondo reactor, in a single pass, thorium LU fuel cycle increases uranium utilization by up to 30% relative to natural uranium fuel and would provide a low-cost insurance policy against future shortage of uranium, as well as provide a bridge to the closed thorium fuel cycles of the future. And he is the mastermind to the thorium cycle called the value breeder, uranium thorium cycle. And there has been a lot of debate. That's why I put these slides. And what is that value breeder concept? He is the guy who talk about the fuel composition that is using thorium along with plutonium or enriched uranium 235 to initiate the cycle. The gain because of the breeding which is happening by converting uranium to uranium 233, about 40% of the power according to him, is derived from this bread uranium-233. And near breeder efficiency is something we all have to understand. Rather than aiming for the highest possible breeding ratio, the value breeder aims to be an economically efficient near breeder, making it a super converter. There is a report which I just saw from the STEP. They have done a lot of calculations on this. For example, if we use a classical PSW 1 gigawatt, today it consumes 130 to 150 tons of natural uranium. It produces 500 kg, 450 kg of plutonium. And the same reactor of the PSW, the flexibility, same reactor we can use also, plutonium 2.5 tons annually and thorium. It can produce 580 kg of uranium 233, which is a fissile material. Same reactor, we can put natural uranium 110 tons, slightly enriched uranium 1.1% is 50 tons, and thorium, it can yield plutonium 115 kg and uranium 233 180 kg. Same reactor of 1 gigawatt, if you put 110 20 tons of natural uranium and thorium, as I say, which we are doing today in classical PSWRs, this will not only produce plutonium 420 kg, but also uranium 233 27 kg. Even PSWRs with uranium 233 initial and thorium, they can be causing a self-sustained equilibrium thorium. This is possible. One has to really do a design assessment. Probably some design changes may be required, which I don't know exactly today. But PSWR is a candidate where it can use thorium also today in a different platform. And towards this, let me tell you the MIT report, which I just took it yesterday from the MIT report. What it says, the amount of the money saving if you use a classical anil fuel for the entire 24.5 gigawatt global PSW fleet, it can save 13 to 31 billion dollar if we use LU and 19 to 41 billion dollar if you use HALU anil fuel. This is something probably gives us a good room to assess how good is thorium to induct at the beginning of the cycle. So what I say, accelerating thorium deployment, there are alternate ways. Even apart from the classical three-stage program, one can look for PSWRs, whether it's a BSR 700 megawatt, anil fuel or other fuel compositions, which I see this have to be established. Probably they may require some design changes that need to be done. AHWR was designed with thorium. It has the potential to be converted to an SMR. It is a 300 megawatt reactor designed for no impact in public domain. In fact, this reactor was designed to be put in the heart of a city like Mumbai. It's time to rethink about ASWR. Accelerator driven subcritical system. This is something where thorium can be utilized in PSWR with the external neutrons. But all these things will require definitely a lot of work, especially the thorium front end and back end, which we have to do. Apart from this, advanced SMRs, microreactors using thorium also, not only India is doing, but across the world people are working on, especially China, America, Russia. They're in advanced stages. Some are already operating MSBRs, gas-cooled reactors, and other technologies which are hybrid also in operational stages, which we have to think about how to bring those technologies, especially the private entities, and scale it up to the right size and domestically manufacturers. What I say, Indianize those technologies so that cost comes down. So the task ahead for all of us is first one is technology vendor establishment, fuel supply, fuel fabrication we have to do in India, otherwise we have to dependent always on outside. The supply chain need to be developed and established. Financing model has to be established. Licensing. Today only we have licensed PSWRs or I'll say that VVR and FBRs. But we have to think about new technologies, especially SMRs. And the last but not least, 100 gigawatt nuclear power will require several thousands of trained manpower. This is where the human resource development capacity building has to happen. My strategy for nuclear deployment, this is what the question. First thing is very emotionally I put strategy one. Each state must give land to build one or two nuclear parks. It's a responsibility for each Indian. And that way, we can produce 20 gigawatt per state, and this 100 gigawatt emotional thing can be resolved in next 5 years. Strategy two, replace all brownfield sites and captive sites by SMRs, which has the potential to produce 2 to 5 times more electricity than what coal was producing. Strategy three is putting the micro modular reactors in the captive power sites and along the India's coast highways for hydrogen corridor, desalination, and the most important, we have to think of putting Northeast region, isolated regions, airports, hospitals, strategic applications. This is something we have put right now today. How Shanti Bill has helped. Shanti Bill is really a breakthrough in India's transition to 100 gigawatt. It enables private central state PSUs to build, own, operate, including decommission and PPs. Private funding, including FDI, which very recently government allowed FDI up to certain percentage is possible now in nuclear power growth. Any industry can import, fabricate the fuel, so the burden on the government is significantly removed. Collaboration with foreign entities to deploy reactors of Gen 3 plus, Gen 4, SMRs, micro reactors. This can not only bring technology but also help to deploy in an accelerated manner. Safety, security, safeguard let's understand, remain in the government control. So the public concerns remain, there is nothing called that I can do something on my own. The whole control remains within the government. Licensing remain in the government control. Only those licensed can do nuclear power business. So the public concern is eliminated. Radioactive waste to be handled by the operator under ARB, stringent safety regulation. So public concern is eliminated. ARB, there has been historically debate. No, it is not independent. Now it has been established by Act. Concern of independent functioning of ARB is eliminated. This Shanti Bill gives a much bigger edge for nuclear energy research development, which is open up now. I believe in the next decade, lot of startups, collaborations are expected soon. Third party liability simplified, especially there has been a lot of debates. Supplier liability, Article 46 of the Liability Act, these are removed. So 100 gigawatt nuclear power is possible to me. It's not a big thing. There are 10 industries that step in. If we build 10 gigawatt, 10 nuclear plant, so it's 100 is possible. The biggest enemy in the mind is the radiation phobia. And here you can see, if I go for a heart CT scan, I am not afraid to get 17 millisievert. Full body CT scan, 10 millisievert. X-rays, 4 millisievert. But when I build a nuclear power plant, the dose to the public is not in millisievert. It is in microsievert. But still, it's the talk of the town that nuclear is dangerous. The danger word comes historically from the Japan. The Hiroshima Nagasaki bombing, and radiation leak, radiation exposure, and there is concern that people in Japan, they were victims of atomic bomb radiation. But nobody knows until now, let me tell you, we have never read that what happened to the atomic bomb survivors in Japan. Two tables I have shown here. When these atomic bombs were dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, let's understand there are no radiation measuring devices. Nobody knew who has received how much dose. What America did, America retested those bombs in one of its desert called Nevada Desert. with the radiation measuring devices. And later on, almost after 50 years, it remapped with the atomic bomb survivor of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Assuming this is the dose from the epicenter people who lived, they might have received, and what happened to their health? Please understand, two boxes I have put in red. What it shows that people who received dose up to 200 millisievert, please remember this number, up to 200 millisievert, their death, either by leukemia or by solid cancer, was much, much lower than the people who were never exposed. Rather, the lifespan was found to be longer than the average Japanese people. So the question is, in Chernobyl, when the accident happened, the amount of radiation leak was tremendous. It was, in fact, much, much more lethal than the Hiroshima bombing. But the maximum dose which the public received here was hardly 100 millisievert, not even 200 millisievert. And people who were living outside the exclusion zone all were removed. But the animals, birds, they lived in the exclusion zone. What has happened to them? Did they die of cancer? There has been a lot of studies on that. Scientific studies has been done by American scientists, especially on the wolves who were living in the exclusion zone of Chernobyl. And what it showed that Chernobyl wolves are exposed to more than 11.28 millirem of radiation every day for their entire lives, which is more than 6 times the legal safety limit for a woman. And the scientists found the wolves have altered the immune system, similar to cancer patient undergoing radiation treatment. But more significantly, she identified specific parts of the animal genetic information that seem to be resilient to increased cancer risk. What has happened in Fukushima? Fukushima nuclear accident 2011, three on-site workers died because of earthquake tsunami. A lot of fatalities happened because of the tsunami. 7,800 workers deployed received average dose of 7.7 millisievert, 30 received dose of 100 millisievert, and some could have received dose of 250 millisievert or more. More than 200,000 people were evacuated. There were nearly 600 non-radiological deaths, primarily because of the shifting of the people from that place to isolated places. Old people, those who have a history of other diseases, because of the stress, they died. This is where the America is doing. There is nothing called, there is revisiting the clause called as low as reasonable achievable, ALARA principle. The DOE is removing the ALARA from the directives, including an official order saying that the policy was reviewed by the administration as overly burdensome to the nuclear industry with minimal safety benefits, aiming to align regulations with current, less conservative scientific evidence. This is what I want to say. That's why I wrote this book called The Unreasoned Fear of Radiation. A lot of things you can see here. And if you go to France, next to the highways will be the all big sized nuclear power plants. It's something we all have to understand, accept, and move forward. Thank you very much for giving me this chance to speak to this August gathering. Again, I'm grateful to IITACB for giving this chance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nayak. It is very nicely brought out many aspects, and there are quite a few questions. I will try to take questions in different categories first. So let's first deal with the technical part. So this is also, I also actually wanted to ask you this. So there's a question which says nuclear submarines are naturally using SMRs because they are less than 200 megawatts. So is the SMR same design or is there a different aspect?
They are small in size, but there are some other aspects. See, their life is definitely smaller, and they use different fuel. They don't use a commercial fuel. So, which fuel I don't want to describe here, but they don't use a classical commercial fuel. That is one point. And second thing, that certain equipment they use, which is dedicated for a limited lifetime of the submarine. Yeah, so they're different.
There's another question which says, is there a possibility of using depleted uranium waste as a fuel in a traveling wave reactor?
Traveling wave, I don't know exactly how it works and all, but depleted uranium, even our PHWRs also once upon a time, along with the natural uranium, DU, and I showed you also there are many options of using the DU, even fast reactors, PU and DU, that is called depleted uranium, can be used, yes.
Okay, there's a question about what is the time frame for SMR reactor to go live?
See, what I say, the technologies are really developed now, and it's time that we have to get off quickly. Certain technologies are in the advanced stage of deployment. It's time to have the collaboration. Our industries, I don't want to name them, they're already in advanced talks with the foreign vendors for the technologies, and they're looking for very straight to Indianize and then bring down the cost, localize and assure the full supply. So they are looking for maybe next 5 years they want to go for building the SMRs. This is what. Yeah.
There's another question which says, what is there a scope for floating offshore SMRs?
This is going to happen much faster than the SMRs even on the ground. Let me tell you, because certain industries like ONGC, there are certain industries, even our some of the isolated islands, they are looking for small size floating nuclear power plant. So this is going to come much faster. And the Russian floating nuclear power plant, such technologies may going to come to India quickly.
Okay, now there are some questions from industry point of view. So let me move to that and then again we can come back. Before I forget, there have been a lot of requests on whether you can share your slides. So maybe you should, if you can, just send it to the organizers and they will share that. Yeah. So this is an interesting question which says, are there any opportunities for business that we can value addition to any part of the supply chain as MSME?
Correct. So, as you know, I was telling that suppose even you talk about an SMR of 300 megawatt, and that itself is an investment of 7-8 thousand crores, and then no large size, no big industry alone can do that. They will be relying on MSMEs for supply of many such equipment. Even the instrumentation also sector is going to climb. Even the materials also going to come. So MSMEs have a large role to play as we are going forward. So one is nuclear island, and there is called the balance of plant. And the balance of plant, all classical things happens. So as we move forward, I think MSMEs will have a much bigger role to play. Yeah.
Yeah, and I hope this will all contribute to the speeding up the technology development in the country. The other question is, which are the companies at the forefront of carrying out most of this EPC work?
Oh, so I should not name them. Maybe there some will get. But today,
Yeah,
as you know, L&T is the champion. I should not say. Walchand Nagar. Sorry, I don't want to name others.
okay, fine. I think it's okay. It's fine. It's
I think let's not talk about this. Yeah.
Yeah. I also was ambivalent about asking it, but I thought let people know. Yeah. Okay. Now there are this is so before I take one more provoking question, let me just, I think this there. It says, is there any drug being developed to take care of a catastrophe to prevent radiation hazard effect on DNA, RNA? Is it possible? I think this is something related to, like the iodine tablets were given out after the Fukushima
Yeah. But let
acidity.
me tell you, Bandana,
Mhm.
I myself was surprised also. I did not show that slide today. If a patient is getting breast cancer, how much dose he is given? Probably the public doesn't know. It's of the order of 8,000 plus millisievert of gamma dose is given.
Yeah.
And if he's getting a lungs cancer, it's much more lethal than that. And we are all worried about millisievert and microsievert.
We actually get a lot of dose when you fly also. Most of the
We
people
get
don't know
much
that.
dose. So
So
this
if you are a
public,
frequent flyer, you get a lot more dose when you are flying out. Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
So we have to understand. In fact, when I was telling this number uh, to my wife, she's so scared of nuclear. I said, do you know that if a female gets breast cancer, how much dose she is exposed? She could not believe that doctor, he says, doctor never tells us, okay, so much, radiation we are being given.
Yeah.
So we have to
But
think
I guess the
nuclear
question is,
differently.
yeah,
Yeah.
the question is aimed at if there is a particular thing which is stopped. So it is sometimes, I mean, depends on the locality and the issue. So, but as you say that at least with the modern design and generation 3 and generation 4 reactors, the catastrophes which were witnessed in the past are
Yeah.
extremely unlikely. And I
Yes.
think that's an important.
Absolutely.
And after we deal with some more questions, I'll come back to another story, which I think will be a good point to stop. And so there is a question on anil fuel.
Yeah.
What is anil fuel? Is it proprietary? Could you answer something about it?
Anil fuel, as I understand, I think our Kakotkar Shah is the mastermind behind that. I'm only a scientific man in that. It uses a combination of halu, thorium. Thorium is, halu is close to, I think, 20% and 80% is thorium in that. So the overall enrichment comes to almost 5%, you can say. And what they claim is that the burn up goes of the order of 60,000 megawatt days per ton, which is very close to that of the light water reactor. Because the burn up is some 7, 8 times more, the spent fuel volume is reduced by almost 7, 8 times. So that is where, I was showing a slide where the MIT study shows that almost 30, $40 billion is saved for I think those PSWRs which are operational today, if they change from classical natural uranium to anil fuel, the amount of money they are going to save is something like 20 to $40 billion. So it's a huge economic save. And this is where the private companies could be tempted that, okay, I need anil fuel, provided, of course, AERB has to license and the testing and qualification has to be complete.
Okay. Let me now get to a somewhat provocative question, which is it's the question. Most of the people also have added comments saying they enjoyed your talk, which I also can reimburse. So, why India is always behind China and other countries that you mentioned in reactor issue? Will we always be copycats and good in Me Too technology development?
Actually, this is a sensitive question to be talked in a webinar. And what you say is absolutely correct. Sometimes I also feel the same way. Look at the number of patents they make, number of IPs they make, number of technologies they make. We're definitely lagging in most of the cases. That's true. And probably the mindsets are, I don't know, probably the scientific culture, which is different. Of course, our brains are much superior as compared to Chinese, but I feel the work culture would be different. I don't have really an answer that why Chinese are moving much faster as compared to Indians. And look at SMR, CNP 100. They have already built it. It's a 100 megawatt SMR. Probably in a year or two, it will be going to be connected to the grid. And if it happens so, then they will be the cheapest supplier of SMR globally. and then a big market we may lose. So this is something. These are sensitive things, definitely. That's why there was a lot of discussion. Kakodkar Saab used to speak that we should export our small PSWRs, 220 megawatt PSWR, which is the cheapest in the world, and with the anil fuel. The anil fuel is the American fuel, and 220 megawatt PSWR is the India's technology and is the cheapest in the world with American fuel supply assurance. Probably we could be the global supplier of this nuclear, could have been, especially to the newcomers. But if we don't do that, China is going to do that. That's something that's true. Same thing also with regard to molten salt reactor. Let me tell you, high temperature reactors. A university in China, Tsinghua University, have built a 20 megawatt high temperature reactor several years back, which we have not done it. So, but now the Santi bill has given us the edge. The universities are entering. Now they will enter. The R&D systems will enter. There could be many more technologies which may happen soon. Yeah.
Yeah, so there are a few more points, but I think it's we also have to take care of time. So I have two more questions. One is uh, this fusion technology. Now that
Yeah.
the nuclear fusion question, and we know India is also part, and there's a global effort in going in the ITER, and that will be cleaner nuclear fuel than that's still a nuclear energy, but it will
Yeah.
be cleaner than the fission. So, and considering that there are some breakthroughs are expected in another decade, how do you envisage this fission reactors and the fusion reactors mapping up?
I told one slide that it's called the hybrid. So fusion to me by 2050 the technology will be established definitely, and it will take another 2 decades to make a commercial viable product. So by 2075 we can find fusion commercially viable fusion technologies. So the next century belongs to fusion, and after some time probably we'll go for fission fusion hybrid. And today also, let me tell you, Bandana, uh, some of the Japanese companies, they were offering fission fusion hybrid to drive thorium today. They say using fusion, I am giving you extra neutrons. You drive the thorium through the fission process. So this may come up much earlier than the actual fusion technologies. But everything depends on the technology establishment. And there is one more difficulty in that because the audience is listening. That time I was the advisor to Director General IAEA. Because fusion produces neutrons, there is the IAEA has the fear using the neutrons one can convert the material to fissile materials. So now the fusion startups, which until now is not there, probably will be put under safeguard. And once they are put under IAEA safeguard, the technology has to be opened up. So this could be a showstopper for many as we move forward. This is only because many are listening. I'm just sharing that.
Yeah, sure. Now, so it's really been a very rich talk with a lot of dimensions covered, a lot of canvas covered, and a lot of food for thought. So I would like to just ask you a trick question while we are stopping. The oldest reactor.
You're asking me?
Yeah, which is the oldest reactor?
Oh, I think you know which you have to go to Chicago pile or to go to power production reactor or which one you are talking about?
I wanted you to go to even older than that. Oklo.
Oh, that they say under the
Oklo.
yeah, okay, right, right. Sorry, huh?
No. The reason I brought in this because we all are worried about the safety of the nuclear reactor, but this is something which is very interesting because there was a naturally run reactor couple of billion years back
Correct.
in South, at least in one place that is in South Africa, it is found. And what's impressive is that the fission products are all localized. So because we talked about radiation effects, I thought I would bring that in. Of course, the Chicago was the first man-made reactor Fermi's pile, which was
Right.
there.
Sure,
But
sure.
and there is no reason to believe that this was the only reactor in Oklo. It could have happened at other places also. There would have been a reactor. So it was because the uranium 238 and 235 decay differently. A few billion years ago, the concentration of 235 was high, so critical mass was reached. Groundwater worked as a moderator, and I'm sure all of you can look up on the wiki. It's a very interesting thing which was found in the IAEA. Yeah, so thank you very much, Dr. Nayak, and thank you, Sushila and Surja, for giving me the opportunity to also conduct this talk. So back to you, Sushila. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This has been exciting. We've been for a long time wanting to have a webinar on nuclear because it's so critical and so important for us. And so, of course, with Kalpakam going critical, we thought this was the right opportunity. Also, 9th May being, 11th May being, our famous
Technology Day.
Technology Day, and also the day when Pokaran happened. We thought, it should be very topical to do this today. So thank you ever so much, both Dr. Nayak and Dr. Vandana, for this. Just a quick summarization, few takeaways. As we change the nature of what we do, the changing nature of our demographics, the amount of data that we generate, the advent of AI and its presence in everything that we do, we are going to see an exponential increase in the amount of power that we require. 2047 for India is a critical year. Looking at a balance between energy and what happens to warming of the environment. That is a really nice slogan, 100 gigawatts by 100 years of India as an independent country. It's a good way to remember the target and where we want to get to. We have large power plants that are retiring. Captive power plants are increasing in terms of their requirement and their demand. Ships, for example, do need more and more power as well. And so the power requirement is just all over the place. India's challenges include things like very limited amount of land availability given the density of our population, water, and we are going to be water starved. It's a scary thought, but it is real. At the same time, we have issues for nuclear power, things like the capital cost, safety concerns on which we spent a lot of time, fuel supply, and then, of course, how do you manage nuclear waste? So these were some of the aspects that I picked up. Dr. Nayak went on to describe the various technologies that exist, the various options that are there, and he described where each of those is applicable and in what way we can make use of those technologies. And then he went on to talk about challenges in setting up nuclear plants. Greenfield for India is a challenge. Space is a challenge. The high investments that are required, safety issues, and emergency planning, and what that is with respect to setting up large nuclear plants. And then, of course, there are concerns like seismic activity, dry cooling, and thorium, and so on. So these are all various factors that have come into the pot with respect to our taking a call on how we go forward. And therefore, he made the case for SMRs and explained that these are almost zero risk, especially from the public fear of meltdowns. The temperature is way lower than what is required for that would result in a meltdown. These are modularized. These are factory assembled, so easy to set up, easy to manage and deploy. So therefore, he then went on to say, so therefore, what should India do? One point was, and again, discussion from many of the questions from our audience, domestic design and manufacture, 100% localization is so important for us, especially from the point of view of keeping the costs low. Greenfield sites for the large plants repurpose the coal plants and fossil fuel-based plants. A very interesting discussion around, and I found that really the amount of detail you've gone into to say this plant is like this, and here's what we can do with each part of that location was absolutely interesting. And then SMRs, and then micromodular reactors. For me, the micromodular reactors are really closer to the power consumption points, which means the question of efficiency of transmission, which is a big problem for us today, can actually go away. And then we segued into thorium. That is the magic word today. It is the most sustainable nuclear fuel that we know of today. Dr. Nayak went on to tell us and explain Dr. Baba's brilliant three-stage the idea of the three-stage use of nuclear fuel, and again, that's again very brilliant. And then went on to talk about a proposed strategy for India. We need to work on many different aspects simultaneously, and he talked about it again during the discussion. We heard a lot of different thoughts around that. But just a few bullets. Every state should put up at least a couple of nuclear parks, captive plants, move them into SMRs, and then the modular reactors close to where power is going to be consumed, places like hospitals and so on. That also because we need uninterrupted power in all of these places. So it makes sense to generate where you're going to consume. And then a really hopeful note in terms of talking to us about the Shanti Act, how it is a shot in the arm for India, particularly for the nuclear program, and how strong safety regulations are now in place, and therefore the fear that we have of what happens with nuclear can actually be put aside. So we end on this very hopeful note today that all sectors, academia, everybody steps in to collaborate and move towards a much higher nuclear adoption. So thank you so much, Dr. Nayak and Dr. Navandana, for this very, very interesting session. To our audience, thank you very much for being with us, for your questions, for participating.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.